Great. So Andrew and
Can
I,
everybody see my screen here?
yeah, each week we come with a concept or a kind of sort of hallmark theme that helps us organize around these threads of masculinity. And we're starting to notice that there's a way in which when we sort of invoke a theme, our own lives begin to take on that in a kind of almost psychedelic mirroring of culture and of the world and of our own lives. And so we're thinking next time we'll choose flow. So easy, graceful flow will be the concept for next time, which is absolutely available and is absolutely, in a way, our responsibility as men to find a way to be flowing with that which seems impossible. And so in that context, we'll just go to this first slide here. So when we talk about impossible, this came up as a kind of touchstone that we were hearing in different calls and just in our own lives about this sense of it's impossible. It's impossible to work this edge of where I am in my own self. It's impossible to work this relationship. It's impossible to solve this political chaos. It's impossible to find a way to occur in the cosmos, as it were. And so we're going to go through those 4 ways that impossibility occurs for us as men, and then we'll switch into shares. So I'll just start with the first one here, which is the self. And in this way, really what we're pointing towards is how do we relate to what we experience in our lives moment to moment to moment. I was building a chicken coop last week, and there were moments where I had a flash. I remember making fun of my father as a kid because he had this war with the squirrels, and it started out as just a bird nest. And then the bird nest became a bird nest with like a metal dome on it so that they'd bounce off. And then it became with nails on the sides. So when the squirrels jumped, they'd impale themselves. And then it became like a skirt on the bird nest thing so they couldn't climb up it. And I remember thinking, you're ridiculous. Like you're just in this ego battle. And then I'm out here building a chicken coop. And I realized, oh my God, I'm my father. Like I am occurring, or life is occurring to me as this impossible to solve, Gordian knot of life. And I think that the point that we'll get to over the course of these slides, and then I'll hand it off, is that when we are relating to impossible as fact, we're kind of lost. When we're relating to impossible as feeling, we can have humor and we can find a contact point with which to make some movement, some change, some dance. And so the difference between what has us in our sort of victim helplessness and what has us in our fluid ability to work with what's impossible, because nobody says impossible has to be impossible. And so with that, I'll hand it off to you, Andrew.
Thank you. And so one thing with the structure of these is that they're not separate. So you can already get a sense of they're holographic here. So all aspects of impossibility are nested within each other. So obviously relational here, said relationship is impossible squared, because basically you have the impossibility at the level of the self, and then you have 2 or more people together, and you have the impossibility of one self plus the impossibility of another self, and the impossibility of relating to each other. And it's not to say that you can never get to a place of happiness. And we really want to reiterate that impossible here doesn't mean that it's never going to happen, but that we have to face it in its impossibility. And so in relationship, whether we're talking about a romantic relationship or any other kind of relationship, you enter into a field where there's always more to give. There's always more that's demanded of you than there is time in the day, than you have energy for, than you have resources for. And if you bow to that path of relationship, you'll always be in over your head, right? Because the more you lean in, the more ground there's going to be to cover. And as soon as you get into the game of trying to please someone else in order to bring more comfort into your own life, you're off the mark. You know, you've lost already. And it's kind of like at the ego level, as soon as you get into trying to satisfy all of your own kind of selfish wants and needs to get to the place where you can finally relax and finally meet life fully, you're lost. You'll never get there. And with relationship as well, there is this dance of finding a way to bow to the impossible demand of meeting another person fully. And only then, ironically, can you begin to meet them fully. Can I just get a show of hands? Can you guys feel the impossibility of relationship somewhere in your life right now? It's a life path for sure. So with that, I'll kick it back to Pieter for the next level here.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm a little bit intimidated by this one, not because of any, like, I don't want to offend somebody, or because this is like, you know, better say the right thing politics wise. It's because I haven't got this worked out for me. I don't think I need to ask for a show of hands of how impossible the political situation feels in our country right now, because I feel like I know that everybody senses that it is, something's got to change. I've been sitting with the question the last few days, as I'm sure many of you had, which is, what can I do? How do I impact this? How do I feed it? Whether it be going on a protest, whether it be making a Facebook post, whether it be donating to organizations for racial justice, social justice, there's a way in which it sort of lives out there as this impossible thing. And being a leadership coach and an embodiment worker and a farmer, I often sort of believe and help guide people into the body, into relationship with earth, into relationship with our own sense of agency. And that right now even feels a little bit privileged, a little bit convenient, a little bit ineffective. And so I think what I'm bringing for this slide and for this moment is, I guess, my thinking around the political situation and around the earth and around everything that's happening is that what we're experiencing is consciousness is kind of caving in around us, and there's no one to blame, and there's no way to get out of the situation. This is not to say that white supremacy and white capitalism and white privilege are not absolutely responsible for and must be, frankly, destroyed. However, my take is we are in the impossible territory politically, and my latest thinking or guess on it is that we each have to reckon with that individually as men and collectively as men, in terms of how we dance with what seems impossible and what our theory of change is, of how the world actually shifts to become what we want rather than more of what we abhor. And so no answers from me right now, more questions, and I maybe we can see if that spills into the shares. So I'll kick it to you, Andrew.
Thank you. So here we take it to the level of universal. And we liked this quote from a teacher of Peter's and mine. Humans aren't here to succeed. We're here to fail beautifully at attempting to feed that which gives us life. And you can see where this is holographic, because to encounter this universal level of what we're dealing with here, we're doing it from the level of self, you know. And I think right now everything that's going on in the world politically is really taking people to this level of the universal struggle for reconciliation. I think of the story of Einstein in his last days of life, and here's someone who literally took human understanding to the furthest reaches, and the question that he was left with about life was, is it friendly? And to me, that's really the dilemma here at this universal level, is that question is not answerable except by our questioning. And it's moment by moment. It's never resolved. It's never, we don't get to the big grand resolution of, you know, how things play out in the world. It's how we choose each step at the level of self. So at the universal level, we circle back to facing ourselves at each of these levels. What are we bringing to this equation of impossibility? And at each of these levels, we're, like Peter said, we're not off the hook. There's nowhere to escape to. It's not like we can sort of go to this universal level of reckoning with impossibility and say, okay, well, you know, this is where I'm putting my attention, so I don't have to deal with all the messy stuff at the relational and political level. That's bypassing, right? We, in order to create our dance, in order to feed that which gives us life, as Martin Prechtel says, we need to do that reckoning at all levels. We need to really wrestle with what feels impossible about ourselves. We need to wrestle with what feels impossible in our relationships and what gets mirrored back to us by the people closest to us in our lives. And we need to reckon with our reaction to what's going on politically and how we're playing into it. Even if our story is that I'm an innocent bystander, I don't have anything to do with what's going on, I'm just sort of a cork bobbing in the waves, we're responsible for this dance. And so with this, we're going to open it up to the shares, and the invitation is to really, again, this is a map. So get a sense of where you're predominantly doing your questioning, your reckoning, you're wrestling with how you're showing up as a man and how you're showing up as an actor in the world, and where it might be a blind spot. Maybe you're focused on the political level right now and you're not looking at your own dance, you know, what's going on internally with your own grappling between these different forces. And so this is a chance to try out where it might feel thin in your own dance with it, or where it might be loudest. So with that, I think Peter's gonna tee up the shares here. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we close this out?